Hey guys, this is my long-term review on my Asus Zephyrus G15, which I purchased back in November of 2021 during the Black Friday sales. So I've had it for about a year and a half, give or take. This is one of the most highly recommended gaming laptops out there, and it's ranked as one of the best thin and light gaming laptops, if not the best laptop by a lot of those big YouTube tech reviewers. That's actually the main reason I bought this back in 2021, was because it just seemed like the laptop that everybody was praising and everybody recommended. Now, even though this is the 2021 version with the Ryzen 9 5900HS and the RTX 3070, the things I'm saying here can still generally be applied to the 2022 version, which basically has the same chassis except with a spec bump. So this laptop is still in excellent shape. I baby a lot of my items, and mine would pretty much look brand new if I were to just wipe off this dust. The chassis is very rigid, and it's also fairly lightweight. There's barely any flex when I pick it up and carry it around. You can see even when I carry it on one side, the laptop is still very solid, and it doesn't feel like it's gonna flex or break. I think this case is made out of magnesium alloy or some kind of magnesium composition. So it's pretty durable, and it's also smooth to the touch. The build of this laptop is mainly like a combination of metal and plastic, where the plastic is mainly used on certain parts of the screen, like the bezel down here and also around the screen. It's still not as rigid as a MacBook Pro, for example, but it's good enough and it does the job. The thing about this material though is that this metal is not that cold to the touch. So even when it's freezing in your room and then you pick up this laptop and start using it while it's cold, these palm areas won't feel that freezing cold to the touch when you first use it. Unlike my MacBook Pro, when it's cold and I'm using it for the first time, these parts can get kind of cold to the touch. But over here, it's not that bad. So the good news in terms of how this laptop functions is that everything still works fine to this day. And there's nothing that I noticed that's messed up or broken with this laptop. Here we go, we can see it and see this live. This fingerprint sensor kind of sucks though. Like most of the time when I am booting this thing up, it worked the second time, but most of the time I have to press it like 5 or 6 times, and then it'll basically say it's not working, and then I have to require my password to log in. But yeah, this fingerprint sensor in general has never been that good to me since I've owned it. I will say though that the quality control can kind of be a hit or miss. My first Zephyrus actually arrived with a broken trackpad, and I had to return that to Best Buy and wait for a replacement. I also did a video on that, and you can check that out when I unboxed it for the first time. Other people also said that theirs arrived with a bunch of backlight bleeding, or pixels are dying here and there, or some even other just random weird issues. Mine arrived with a pretty decent screen, but over time, I definitely noticed more of a backlight bleed. It's still not that big of a deal, and I only notice it when I'm looking at a pure black screen while loading in a game, for example, but it is becoming more prevalent. So the trackpad still works very well, and it's actually one of my favorite things about this laptop is that the trackpad is very sensitive and accurate to the touch, and it's also pretty big as well, for a Windows machine at least. The keyboard also still works, but in general, I actually don't really like this keyboard. The keyboard to me is very mushy, but stiff at the same time. It requires like a bit of pressure to hit, and when the button travels down, it's very mushy and it's not that satisfying. At one point, I actually flat out hated this laptop keyboard. I would even go as far to say, in my personal opinion, that this is one of the worst laptop keyboards that I've used, which is a pretty big claim. I even prefer my work Dell Latitude keyboard over this, and even my very old Dell laptop, just like a random one I had lying around. I prefer that over this one too. But hey, I mean, at least it still works, right? And I guess most people don't really have anything to say about the keyboard, or they got used to it, so it works fine for them. So another thing I was curious about when looking to buy this laptop was how well the screen would hold up. And that's because the exhaust fans here, there's two of them, 1 and 2. Not counting the ones on the sides, there's also 2 on each side. But the 2 main ones are right here, located where the hinge is. And they are blowing very, very hot air up towards the screen, towards that plastic section right there. The screen still works good, but I can tell the heat is actually putting some kind of mark or slight damage on this bottom bezel. You can actually see like vertical line markings on the bezel, which is exactly how the air blows out from the vents. Their M16 model actually doesn't even have this bottom bezel here. So on that model, the hot air is just blowing directly onto the screen. So I wonder how that one will fare in a few years after use. But battery life, I'm still getting around 7 to 8 hours with battery saver mode enabled and on optimized battery mode on the Armoury Crate app. On battery, I only web browse since it's kind of impossible to game or edit and stuff like that, since performance is greatly reduced on battery power. Gaming still works wonderfully on this machine though. It still plays all my games well and exactly the same as when I first got it. Basically no real thermal throttling here. I will say though that it does get very hot when playing games. With the 5900HS and the RTX 3070, temperatures while gaming will generally stay around 84 to 91 degrees Celsius throughout the entire gaming period. During gaming, the fans will get really loud and certain areas will get very hot while some stay cool. Luckily, the WASD area over here stays relatively cool while on full load, but areas like above the keyboard here get very, very hot to the touch. And even places like the right side of the keyboard, the spacebar also gets very hot, and this little area here below the keyboard but above the trackpad also gets very hot to the touch. And when I'm resting my hands here playing games, it can get quite uncomfortable after a long period of time. So generally the experience owning this machine has been pretty smooth sailing, but there have been a couple of hiccups that have actually been really bad and kind of messed up the whole experience with the machine at the time when I had those problems. And spoiler alert, this is basically all related to their Asus Armoury Crate software. So the biggest problem I had a few months after owning this laptop is that it would suddenly hard freeze. I have never experienced this type of crash before. Like, there were no blue screens, absolutely nothing. This thing would just suddenly freeze, nothing would work, nothing responds, and I had to force shut down. It would be also very spontaneous, like sometimes it would freeze even 10 seconds after booting up into Windows, or sometimes even a few hours after using it. I basically had to backtrack because I knew I didn't install any new programs and there were no Windows updates at the time. At some point I knew I opened the Armoury Crate software and it did an automatic update. And I knew that was the only thing that was updated or installed during that time. So I did a bunch of digging, trying different solutions, and it turns out it was all because of the Aura Sync feature in the software. Now I'm actually really kind of hesitant to launch this program again, but I'm gonna open it just to, oh my god. There we go, it's checking for updates. If I have any hard freezes in a few days after I upload this video, at least I know to come back to troubleshoot with this software. Yeah, basically the update turned on Aura Sync, or it did something that would cause it to malfunction with the laptop RGBs and completely hard crash my laptop. I couldn't believe it was because of this dumb software update, and that was literally causing my laptop to not be functional. So after I disabled it, I haven't had a single crash since. Fast forward a few months again and everything was working fine. And just for fun, I opened up Armory Crate, kind of like what I'm doing here. And behold, it did an automatic update like what it's doing now. This time, for a few days, I was wondering why my battery life dropped from 7 to 8 hours to basically 1.5 to 2 hours tops. I once again had to troubleshoot everything, and it's because the Armory Crate software did something with my battery power settings where it changed from optimal to something else, and that basically made my battery life horrible. But yeah, basically since then to this day, until now actually, I have not opened the Armory Crate and my PC has been running perfectly. So if I have any problems now, it's because of this app. Okay, so my advice is when everything's running fine on your laptop, just try not to open this as much. Asus doesn't really seem to fully test their updates before putting it out, and it seems to mess up these laptops unintentionally. But other than those problems with the Armory Crate software, I basically love this laptop. This was my first AMD powered machine, and it's definitely a lot more power efficient than Intel powered machines around that time. For those looking for a fairly thin and light gaming machine that you can take on the go with decent battery life, I highly recommend this one. I haven't had any problems since the Armory Crate stuff, and the laptop runs perfectly fine for my day-to-day games and tasks. I forgot to mention a slight inconvenience with this laptop is you can never put it to sleep, because even if you put it to sleep, it's just gonna start up again. You close the lid, it's gonna basically be powered on while the lid is closed. So something to do with this machine, it can't sleep, and other people have said the same thing as well. So that's basically it for my 1.5 year review or general overview on this Zephyrus G15. I haven't done one of these long-term reviews in a long time, and I actually wasn't even sure if I should bother making this video just because it's a laptop from 2021 and there's newer versions now. I actually originally started working on this review back in November, but I just kind of kept holding it off until now because I thought maybe, just maybe, it might help some people out there who are looking towards getting a G15 and seeing how they hold up over time. So once again, thanks for watching this review, and I will see you guys in the next one.